Giving y'all a little bit of that heavy metal. Heavy metal. Metal is all the rage. Metal is all the rage in Overpower right now. That's right, Game Master. There's a new metal card out there. I don't know if you saw that. TFAC going to release a GOAT Galactus. That's right. GOAT Galactus for TFAC. Of course, a lot of people going to have to see that a lot later. Getting the nerves out. It's been a minute since I've been on the microphone. I'm sure y'all missed me. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is the Overpower Mountain Podcast, and I am your host, Marcel, greatest Overpower player of all time. I see the people starting to rumble in, of course. Nice to see Ricky there as well. It's been a New York minute since the Nationals. And boy, did I actually need that break. I don't know about all these people who are going to these new tournaments, but man, I needed the break after the Nationals. I was breathing Overpower leading up to it. And I really thought I had the meta figured out with my deck that I had brought. And however, sometimes luck just is not on your side. Hello, Lawrence. Glad to have you here as well. And as I just mentioned to Ricky, the man that, knocked me out of the top 8, where I truly feel like sometimes, there's just that one match where you feel like if I get through this match, I'm done. I've won this thing, And I have to admit that first hand, and I won't jive on it too long because God knows I want this memory out of my mind. But, it's opening hand. We both place out. I have no intellect icon. Counts towards venture sitting on the table. He's got like 3 or 4 cards placed that have intellect icons. And I just know I have this round. I'm down to 2 cards in my hand. He's down to 1 card in his. And I'm like, man, that ain't the Reaper in his hand. So I push it. I get a little bit pushy. These are the moments. It's like a poker tournament. There's just a moment where you push your chips in and something happens. Sometimes it doesn't. And I ventured 3. And boy, does that boy Ricky just peel the Grim Reaper right off the top of the deck. Just peeled it right off the top of the deck. Now, if anybody knew, I was playing a draw style deck in the Nationals, and all I had in my mind, I already pictured I'd won in that first hand. I was like, oh, if I can get 3 in this first hand and then just draw my draw through, I might go 4 for the win in the next hand. It might be over within 5 minutes. And boy, did he just peel the Reaper right off the top. Pulled 4 cards right off me. But I tell you this, it still came down to a single card in that round, even though he got 4 with the Reaper. Oh, that's enough about sad stories. As you could see, I needed a little bit of time since the Nationals. I needed a bit of time. Glad everybody's rolling in now. I'll tell you this, Ricky. I was devastated, but I was so focused. And we're going to get into this sort of topic and idea right now in this podcast. I was so focused on that tournament that you even doing that, I still felt I was going to win that match. I believed I was going to win that match. And boy, I still almost pulled it out. But again, congratulations moving on past that round. It shall not happen again. But before we get into nationals, regionals, and the modern format, I just kind of want to sort of throw out there very quickly. The NAOL season has kicked off with 2 first-time winners taking them down. 2 first-time winners taking them down. As a matter of fact, in both NAOL finals, it didn't matter who won. It still would have been 2 first-time winners. That was right. There were 4 people in the finals, 2 and 2. And either or, whoever won those matches would have been their first ever NAOL Legacy Tournament win. And I got to say, Dave, after over a decade of dedicated tournament play, a decade, this man's been playing since 2015 earlier, okay? And never won a tournament. Pulled it out. I have to say, when he finally ultimately won that tournament, and he just, like, I saw, because they had the face cam on, and I saw the elation in the man's face, and I know that feeling, as I've won many a tournament in my own day. Well done. Well done. It's a feeling that I hope all of you eventually get to feel. And of course, if you're watching this podcast, you're only steps away from ultimately winning a tournament, because this is the strategy podcast to watch. Of course, dedicated decade of tournament play. Took down Pennsylvania with Zeus, none other than the main god himself, Zeus. And then, of course, there's Justin, who just seemed like he was the unstoppable force. Nay, I call him a juggernaut in Houston, winning both Friday and Saturday tournaments. First time OverPower history someone has taken down the whole weekend's tournaments. Unbelievable. I think you all know, anybody who's played 7 rounds of Swiss, 8 rounds of Swiss, plus 3 rounds to sort of win a tournament, you realize how hard it is to then wake up the next morning and go play more OverPower. You know, there are a few people out there who can continuously play OverPower without, taking breaks or feeling overpowered. The late Phil Miller could play probably 30 days straight, but few were built like that gentleman. And I know myself, it definitely takes its toll, as I don't play a lot of scrap games and sort of things like that to sort of keep myself primed for those main moments, which is a benefit and a default all at the same time. Congratulations, gents. Both of you have worked so hard for those victories. The NAOL season, though, is about to hit its stride. If you thought those last 2 tournaments were competitive, the competition level is about to raise up. I'm talking up here. Okay? Those 2 tournaments here, next 2 tournaments here. These are the ones that are more central, more people will be at. And oh, yeah, the next 2 tournaments are back-to-back Ironman tourneys. What does that mean, Marcel? What does Ironman tourney mean? What does that mean? You know what it means? It means regionals on the Saturday, 7 rounds. I mean, depending on players, 8 rounds. And then, of course, top 8. And then on the Sunday, you then have the NAOL tourney, legacy format, 7 rounds of Swiss, top 8. Now, if you can do that, if you can take down those 2, now that's going to be a level of OverPower legacy that I don't think is going to be seen for a long time. As I just pre-mentioned, these weekends were sort of built for people like Phil Miller. People who just can't get enough of OverPower and just will play game after game after game after game. I'm going to be at both tournaments. I'm going to be playing in all 4 events. If you wanted to have your chance against the great one, make sure you make it to one. Nice to see you there as well, Eric Counts. I like to say hello to people as they come on in. And, of course, Andrew the Prodigy Taylor in the room as well, always giving his great insights. The champ is here. The champ is here. I mean, this man has run 2. He's won a legacy tournament. He won the national championships. Only had 1 loss in both of those tournaments. Guess who it was against? We'll leave it at that. This is what I'll say, though. Those Ironman tourneys are going to be amazing. It's really going to be a true test of your overpower might. Test your might. That's right. It's going to be modern and then legacy. This is going to really show, you know, the weak fall off, and it's going to show the cream of the crop. The cream of the overpowered players will rise to the top on these weekends. And people who really put it in play are the ones who are really going to do well. So let's tackle these two formats separately. Okay. Starting, of course, with modern. Everybody's into the whole modern scene right now. I know we just had 2 NAOL tourneys, but I think everybody's starting to gear up their modern thoughts again as we creep closer, and we're about, a month-ish away from this first regional. It's almost like this regional is a reflection of the nationals. It's almost like it's in the same bat time, same bat channel, same bat group of cards. It's interesting that this is happening because we all just came from the Nationals in Columbus, and now all of a sudden we're going back to Columbus to play another regional. If you had a deck you thought you should have played but didn't in the Nationals, and you're like, man, that deck would have just done way better, Well, now could be your shot. Now is the moment to sort of give a quick, rerun of decks that you thought were going to be good. And as I reflect on the Nationals, there was one thing that really overly stood out to me. And I can tell you right now, the top 8 players, it was how focused and dedicated those top 8 players were. Every player in the top 8 had vigorously tested their decks, played them for months. And you could almost see the focus and determination on people's faces as that tourney started to wind down. I do agree, Andrew, that LRG does need to start releasing some sort of their own content in regards to new characters and players to sort of keep this hype moving. As I'm talking about a tournament that is a repeat of the last tournament. Of course, new people bringing new ideas. But as I talk about the top 8 players, I think about everybody that made the top 8, and all of them were already great players. Now, being a great player isn't what's necessarily going to get you in that top 8, though. It's experience, it's practice, it's focus, determination, and of course, a lot of luck. There was definitely a round that I can recall where I basically ended up playing Adam Abelkop, and I think it was like the 6th or 7th round, and I was already at 2 losses, so I knew I couldn't take another one. And it came down to our final hand, and of course, like many games and many of you out there had, I won by 1 venture, a single point of venture to win the whole entire game. And those are the moments I talk about where a little bit of luck on your side takes you over that hump, takes you over that edge. But as I looked at the top 8 players and their focus and determination, I remember a very unique moment that occurred. I remember seeing Daniel MacArthur at the Subway sandwich shop. I think we'd just broken for the dinner break on the night. And I could see in his body language, in his face, in his mentality, he was beat up. He was fatigued. But it wasn't out. He was reaching into that place that champions find to push on and succeed. He understood all the life sacrifices, all the money he had put into investing into going into that situation. And I could see in his eyes, as beat up as he was, that he really wanted it. With a gentle sort of tip of our cap to each other, I said to him, I said, "You doing all right?" And, his response was almost legendary to me. Even with his success of just getting into the top 8, he looked over at me and he goes, "Still climbing that mountain." And he knew his job wasn't over. He wasn't happy with just getting into the top 8. He wanted to finish that day off and be the national champion. It wasn't over in his mind. You know, he wasn't just resting on his laurels. He wanted it all. Do you have that fight in you? Because that's the kind of mentality, that's the kind of moxie, that's the kind of bravado you need to bring to these tournaments. That's truly what it takes to take one of these tournaments down. You know, and he's in the room right now. If you look at the national champ, Andrew, he put out a video, and I'm curious if he would have put that video out if he had not potentially won that tournament. But, he put out that video where he kind of talked about and explained his lead up to the nationals. And people really should rewatch that. I don't even know where you would see that. I don't even know. Maybe it's on his personal channel, but he explained he had played 50 plus games in the month leading up. I hadn't have played 50 modern games the whole year, essentially. He played 50 games leading up, refining his deck, changing characters, feeling the symbiotism between his characters, feeling the way it worked, learning it, becoming almost symbiotic himself with it. And I can tell you, in our game when we played, he didn't question where to place things. This man was placing cards down. He knew exactly where those cards were going. He knew exactly what place he was going to, or what play he was going to make next. The only error he truly had was, in my mind, playing his own cards and not overly focusing on my deck and understanding what was still left in it. This isn't kitchen table overpower anymore. I think a lot of us just got used to this idea of playing these games on the side, and focusing on I won, I lost. Whereas there are people are living and breathing this game leading up to events. Now, I'm not saying anybody can't have a great deck and go there and have the glory run. But I'm telling you that if you take that time, you focus, you become one with your deck, these are the things that can happen as you sort of move forward and potentially become the next regional champ, the next national champ. Of course, with all that being said, we've talked many, many a time about winning mentality in many a podcast that I've put out. I just wanted to refresh you. And I sort of wanted you to sort of feel that as we enter this new season. Because that's where you have to be if you truly want to be at that top tier level in any card game, let alone OverPower, which just has 1,000,001 tree branches off every game, every decision, every thought. We start a whole new season and hopefully double or more the player pool that currently exists. You have to want it. You have to work harder than everyone to be a champ, especially those new players, because they're going to be addicted. All those games you've put in, all that experience, guess what? They're dying to play. And they're just going to be playing nonstop. So let's take a quick look at the meta snapshot that's occurring right now, and that I still think we're kind of in. The Woo Witch which thank you all for sort of going with that vernacular I created for that deck. I really do think it flows off the tongue for it. But, the Woo Witch is still a big player. Playing it myself, this deck, it just has a lot of answers. It has a lot of ways to sort of manipulate the game and to sort of put your opponent in bad situations. It just has answers, but it is a very tactical style deck, okay? And the biggest issue with something like the Woo Witch is you can't take those early hits. You can't take those early hits and do it for nothing. If you're playing a Woo Witch deck, trust me, you want to sort of creep in just a couple of those quick little hits, because all of a sudden what happens is when those rounds come where he has to start shifting, or she has to start shifting and moving everything, you're going to be in a situation where they just can't pile it up too high anywhere. So get those little hits in on the Woo Witch. Don't be scared to play rounds against it. Almost treat it like a boxing match when you're against a Woo Witch. You're really trying to sort of like duck and weave. You really want them to use those big OPDs on scenarios that don't give them a lot. Force them into rounds. Wager 3. Who cares if you lose 3 venture? Losing 3 venture doesn't lose you the game. Don't all of a sudden think, oh, I don't have this or that. If you got enough just for a couple of rounds, in terms of, in the round, you got a couple of moves on you, throw them. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, the Woo Witch by round 3, round 4 is going to be hurting by that battle. And you're going to have them in a really unique place that you're going to be like, go ahead, throw out your Harness the Wind. Do it. Put it anywhere you want, because it's going to kill everybody. Strings are ruthless. The Seattle group has started to truly refine this approach, bringing Joan and Cthulhu to the same team, and waiting for that moment of weakness or misjudgment by an opponent who thinks, oh, I have 2 defenses, I'm going to be okay. Well, all of a sudden, when it's a 3, make 2 additionals, and then you're like, ooh, I don't have much defenses, but I could land that kill shot right there. And next thing you know, you get a 4, make 2 additionals. And 2 of your characters all of a sudden just been KO'd. It's tough. You really have to do the mental math game of what's happening. And, it's almost a very good counter to these Woo Witch decks, because the string effect, when I'm trying to move things around, as long as they're not the same color, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. And they prey on these moments, this weakness. They pray that by battle 3 or 4, you just misjudged and you don't think that Joan 4 is in their hand. You don't think that Cthulhu 3 is there. And of course, even those 2 characters, unique strategy. I didn't actually see it in terms of any decks that I had seen, but the fact that both of those characters have KO style specials that remove venture are huge. Those are cards that I think are very underutilized in the modern environment right now. Akin to a legacy. Of course, Cthulhu having the onslaught kill a target teammate, and Joan, of course, killing herself or KOing herself and drawing a card. Whew. You throw in a fairy protection. Next thing you know, you have your own unique lockout. I mean, they all have to play off, but with no negates in modern, doesn't seem like that would be too hard of a scenario. So it's a great, unique deck that I think could be built around. I've toyed with a few ideas myself, but of course, testing. They expect that misjudgment to happen, and then boom, your character's KO'd. And you essentially gave the game, because, losing a KO'd character, it changes. It's essentially over because all of a sudden now you're duping and they're not, and they're still stringing at you. And now you're in really big trouble. I gotta say, the Seattle team name should truly be the Seattle Stringers because they definitely have picked up this string effect. All the way from Thomas Keeney's Woolwich Joan deck, to ultimately, as I just mentioned, the Joan and Cthulhu, or even Andrew Taylor's Joan deck by itself had enough because. I mean, Morgan Le Fay's 3 was stringing too, and that was dangerous. Dangerous, It does take a lot, Andrew, for those sacrifice cards, but I just think in a unique scenario that actually could work truly to your benefit, especially, as we see in Legacy, and we're gonna get into that in a minute. The no negate factor, the no way to stop these moments. In Modern, there's, how many Merlins did you see in the tournament? I didn't see any. So this is scenarios where like you're essentially doing free actions that they can't stop other than their one Merlin any hero. Nice to see you, Howard Bertrand. Thank you for joining. We're just talking right now about a snapshot of the Modern meta and where it's at. EFL is relentless. Relentless. I thankfully only played against one Joan deck through the whole string I had to go through in the Nationals, and that was Andrew Taylor. And I remember there's a moment he plays EFL, and of course he played it defensively. Sneaky little guy. And, I said, I can't have that. I can't have that. I can't have that there. And of course, I tried to negate it with my one Merlin in my whole deck. I was like, I don't need this for defense. I want that card off the table. And of course, he had his Morgan Le Fay negate. So he negated my negate. You can do that, Ricky, by the way. And it upset me because I really thought he might let it go through. But then obviously I know he's a better player than that. EFL is relentless. When that card hits the table, I want everybody out there to just, we talk about it. It's on the boards. It's everything. And you have to start to build your mind of how to deal with this card. Because I'll tell you this, if it hits the board, your win percentage is probably halved. That card hits the board, and you probably just all of a sudden went from a chance of winning the game to just boom. Because it just compounds and compounds and compounds over and over. And I remember at one point in the game I was playing against Andrew, I actually killed Joan finally. And then I swear my brain just freaked out for a minute because literally I throw another attack and then he boosts it by 2 again. And I'm just like, I didn't say it out loud because I wouldn't want to embarrass myself, but I just said it in my mind like, no, she's dead. That card can't. And then I was like, oh, Astroplane. Oh, my heart. Oh, my heart. I'm in a tough spot here. A tough spot. That card hits the table, and you're in a tough spot. Now, there was an interesting moment that occurred, and I think we all grow and learn, especially from this podcast and talking about situations. There was a situation in the semifinals where Ricky was playing against Andrew. And I know people are torn on the whole idea of, letting someone take something back. And that's not really the discussion I'm about to have right now, because I think that's up to you. I'll tell you personally, I'm never letting you take something back. You release your finger off the cord, it's over. It's done. Don't even question me. Don't be like, can I move this over here? No, you can't. No, don't even look at me. Don't even ask the question, just in case we're ever playing a game. So now you know. But there was a scenario where And it was a tricky scenario where I think, Andrew went and got his EFL back in his hand, and, I think he threw a six that revealed Andrew's hand, and Andrew could have blocked it by using Harness the Wind and moving it over and using a six to avoid it. But he took it. And then, of course, Ricky immediately goes EFL. I want you to remove EFL. I'm playing Baker Street. And, you know, Andrew, I think something along the lines of goes, oh man, if I just, had a blip in my own brain, and if I would have just thought about you're playing Baker Street, I would have moved it over and blocked the six. And Ricky let him do that exact motion. Take that back, move it over, block with the six. I would, of course, made him reveal his hand first. I don't even think he made him reveal his hand first, but that's besides the point. But I think deep down, and I think they're both in the room, so we can always get to the bottom of this through that way. But I think deep down, Ricky looked at Harness the Wind as a bigger threat to him and his match. And he, based off all his decision making, his experiences, everything, said, I would rather have Harness the Wind, which is placed on your character, not be around for the rest of the game, and let EFL hit the board. I am here to tell you, you never do that. EFL is possibly the greatest modern card, period. Period, period, period. Is the most overpowered modern card. How it's even on a character that is only 18 points is beyond me, let alone the rest of her kit. But she was an amazing woman, so, she did deserve a great kit in that regard. But what I'm trying to get at there is EFL hit the board, and as I just mentioned, Ricky's win percentage just went poof. And I don't know if Ricky hadn't played a lot of Jones that day. I don't know if he was really contemplating, the additional bonuses that came from that. But poof. And okay, so he did actually reveal the hand, and he, did have that scenario, and I don't disagree. I don't disagree that Ricky is an amazing person for both letting that happen, and on top of it, I think he did it for his own benefit. I don't think he actually did it for your benefit, Andrew. I think he really thought that potentially that Harness the Wind sitting place, which it's a close toss up. I think those two cards are probably like very tier to each other as you guys would put your rating system. Both of those are S tier cards. Both of those are cards that you don't want either of them in play, let alone a Harness the Wind sitting there for the rest of the game. So when I bring this back, I'm just trying to reference that EFL is relentless. If you have a way to never let that card come into play, you take that. Because playing that, and now I know a ton of Joan decks are going to be out there, but I mean, they're going to be out there whether we like it or not, whether I say she's the worst or the best character in the whole set. EFL changes games. I mean, it even changes legacy games, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but this card is so over the top that it's unbelievable. You really need to keep your mind on this card, how to remove it, how to deal with it. We talked about it even before the Nationals. And I don't disagree. Van Helsing, Jane Porter. Like, these are frontline characters you might really need to start dabbling into. These are things you really need to start concentrating on. And again, please, I know you gentlemen, I don't want you to, the conversation was not whether you should have done that or not. That's always a personal choice. It really was just to reflect EFL itself and how relentless and dominating that card is. I just want you guys to focus on these types of things because Joan's not going anywhere. Joan's going to be around, not only these couple of regionals, Joan will be around when TFAC comes out, Skybound comes out, you know, all of them, all the future sets. I don't even know if we heard that spoiler right, but I believe on Overpower Adventures, I heard that the boys are coming. And Joan will be big then too. Top cow. It's a relentless card. So, with no change in card pool, expect a lot of the same. Expect a lot of the same, Woo Witches, Jones, Strings, these types of decks. Do not just pigeonhole your mind, though, to automatically play these types of decks, because I want you to be wary. Many top 8 players showed their decks open. They literally showed the community their cards. And just copying a deck isn't gonna let you know exactly how it works, isn't gonna let you know, if you don't know the meaning behind the deck, it doesn't mean you're gonna be able to drive it. Doesn't mean you're gonna be able to sort of take that deck to the same place that that person did. As I mentioned, Andrew became symbiotic. He became one with that deck. He was playing that deck flawlessly. And so were a lot of the top 8 players. That practice really brought it into play. Now, I just think that if you're a player going into the tournament, and we've talked about it before, you need to pick a deck that works with your play style and tempo. And then you forge it yourself with experience until you don't even think about where to place the cards. You just know it. You know what you're going to play first. I'm going to place this teamwork here. I'm going to place that ally there. It's automatic. It's not a question of. Now, I will say personally, I was still toying around with many decks before the Nationals, to the point where I was playing several in the hotel room the night before. I even went to sleep with a deck built on the table and said, I think this is what I'm going to play. And in my dream state, I woke up and I was like, no, that's not going to take me to the promised land. And I literally built my national deck probably 45 minutes before the Nationals. I do not recommend, because I did not even play it once. And I could tell you now, there are probably about 4 or 5 cards that would not make that deck if I redid it today. And I don't think that that's what cost me anything in that Nationals. But I will say right now that, not practicing what I preached I was getting reps in playing the game of Overpower, but I wasn't forging the deck that I was going to bring to that final big tournament. And I basically, relied on a lot of old experience to sort of know what was going to bring a good deck to that moment. Hello, Josh. Glad to see you here as well. Just to finalize on a lot of the thoughts that just creeped up through the comments as well, I do believe Jones EFL should have been paper clipped. I think that immediately would dampen the card to its proper degree of where it should be. But as we know, LRG is not a big fan of erratas or banning cards. That is sure. I will say this, though. That's kind of my thoughts in terms of modern. I thought we got to a good place there. We will have another modern talk closer to the regional. My biggest suggestion is watch the videos that are out there. Great top 8 matches. All the national games give you something to learn, and also show you players' play styles. Going into the nationals, I will tell you this, I watched a lot of old games of people I thought I might face in the top 8. And it was a really big shame that I didn't get to see more of the PAX tournament. The PAX regional, still not even up to this day, because it would have been really good to sort of gauge that Ricky boy a little bit better, because he seemed to be my kryptonite in that nationals tournament, being two of my losses that day, especially the most pivotal in the top eight. And I think had I been able to sort of watch, and even though he showed his deck and opened it up, watching his play style, understanding what he likes to do, I think would have given me a better game plan, a better way to approach how I ultimately would beat him. So watch video, deep dive into those. There's so much there that I don't think people really get when you're watching that. It might even just spark an idea for a deck. It might just bring you something that it just epiphany after epiphany, or like I said, just even seeing people's play styles, knowing how they like to cater things, really is its own advantage as well. Let alone, as I've mentioned in other podcasts, you can often see people's tendencies of, they like to put their power cards on the right hand side of their hand. They like to put all the specials on the left. If they have defensive specials, they like to put it all in one way. So, you know, it's you could really deep dive when you start looking at top tier players and who you might ultimately have to face in that most pivotal game of your tournament. So become inspired and study. Um, let's talk legacy. Let's get into it. Boy, I will tell you this. Legacy just seems more exciting to me right now. You know, legacy just sort of seems like, we've already had two tournaments and we've seen some fun stuff. As I mentioned, two brand new tournament winners, let alone four brand new people in the finals, bringing very unique style decks from, juggernauts to Zeus's to using morphs boost card. It's just really a lot going on there. And of course, even, Ricky playing the kill card off, the old Carl Karf, idea. And it really just unique games. And I remember actually watching the last final, the Houston final, and I was actually almost commentating the final. If you actually watch it and sort of go to the comments during the finals, I'm actually almost commentating my thoughts on the game right away. So it's quite an interesting watch, I have to admit that. I was back and forth. I was like, oof, oof, oh, this could happen, oh, that could happen, oof. There was a lot of slogfest. At one point I was just like, oh, Justin has this wrapped up. And it was actually my lady who turns around, she's like, you've played enough Overpower to know that a game can change. And I literally go to her, I'm like, oh no, Ricky just doesn't have any cards that can really sort of like bring this game back to his way. And lo and behold, Ricky probably had like one or two opportunities to still win that game. I will tell y'all out there before I get into this, like, if you're playing Zeos, if you're playing anybody, do not forget the effects of their inherent abilities. Do not forget the effects of cards, special cards that you're playing. If you go to my nationals game, I actually we're about to go into like almost last hand, and I'm playing against Corey Sims. Spell it how you want, and I actually KO one of Corey's characters with the Billy the Kid 5, and I'm supposed to move a mission. But I'm so hyper focused on the round, and he did a great job of just flipping his character, handing the cards over right as fast as humanly possible. And I missed moving that venture, which really would have put him in a hard spot going into the final hand. But of course, I missed it. It's my fault, And trust me when I say I saw that on camera, I was like, I will never let this happen again. But even when you're in the finals, and I know it's easier said when you're watching something like that, but trust me, those little moments, those little mishaps, they are tough. And in that particular scenario in the finals, you know, Justin KOs one of Ricky's characters, and then Ricky flips it, and then Justin has two cards left. He sees Ricky has no more, and he immediately just throws both cards down. He doesn't even play them one at a time. He's just like, well, those two are going to go to that character. And I think it was the same scenario I just mentioned with that Corey spot, where it was just a quick reaction of your opponent, and it blipped his own mind where he just didn't draw the card for Zeos. And so it was, like you have to really trust me, even at the end of a 10-hour day, little tiny moments like that can ultimately focus and change things, can truly focus and change things. And, I think, and again, I'm sure from what I hear, the Spartan Training Ground boys are going to do commentary on these games later. But I tell you, Ricky, the way I think you actually could have won that game is if I think you had a Dark Beast and a Scarlet Witch negate in the second to last hand. And I think if you would have ultimately, or one of the second or third last hand, if you would have focused on negating the goblins boost stat, I think you really would have had a chance at winning that game because it would have left him with two 6 stat characters when you would have still had an 8 as well as your 7. But teach their own. Make sure you check out that game. Great final. Great final. Um, you just can't predict what someone is going to play anymore. In Legacy, it is all over the place. And boy, is that fun. You know, with the last Lambo variant to even win a Legacy tournament, being my own with the King Arthur version that I brought to the Ed Memorial last year tourney. It seems people are truly branching into some wild thoughts in Legacy. I truly believe as I watch these legacy tournaments, and I think people are just so used to the modern format that it's hard for them to flex into it. But I truly believe that you are at a disadvantage if you play any heroes in Legacy. You are just giving up this such a unique, such a unique um, opportunity to be in this forced one-off scenario. Now, a lot of people are like, "What do you mean?" And it's like, of course, quickly, battle sites give you those opportunity. I'm holding a Dark Beast. It could be one of 3 cards, right? And it doesn't mean that if I concede and that Dark Beast goes into my, KO'd characters pile, that I now can't use Dark Beast cards because I'm going to draw another one. And if I didn't even use one of those cards, I now am going to have the advantage of still having the choice of all 3 cards. And when you get into these situations, I mean, I do get it. There are a couple big advantages to any heroes, of course, being, the Shattered Image event, no activators being able to be played, as well as, the dupe ability coming down in a massive way. But when you're building these battle sites now, a lot of the times you're just using 2 activators, possibly 3 for your 1 per deck as you build these thought processes. But I just think the game, the strategy, the opening with these battle sites truly is just is the advantage of Legacy. um you have to remember that your battle site is built to complement your deck. I think the problem is a lot of people are going, and when they start to play Legacy, they're looking at it more as like how I think the new battleground is going to appear in the next set. In the Skybound set, we're supposed to get a new battleground, which is almost like a new any hero suite. And I think from the rumors I hear, it's a lot more defensive. You know, um, it's a lot more defensive in terms of the original any hero set. And I just think that's what people are almost doing when they create a battle site for the first time. They build their team. They're like, my team does this. I'm a little bit heavy on the offense, so I need defense. So what am I gonna do? Okay, so I'm gonna just take the Outback because it's got the most defense. But they don't really look at like, what's your deck's theme? How does your battle site accentuate that theme? Are the two working in cohesion with each other, or is your team the offense and your battle site's the defense? Like I said, we're seeing some really, really uh unique changes, like with the morph boost stat card. Like that's huge. That paired up with Barsoom, the fact that you can just mimic one of your own character's stats and draw a card for it, and that site already has other great cards in it. These are the types of things that I'm talking about, and I see, Joshua Christopher here talking about X World, and that's actually what I brought initially because I was so fearful of Zeus nines, Zeus nines, Zeus nines. Like I don't know why, it just got in my head that everybody's going to play Zeus with nines. And I went to X World because, in Legacy they had actually changed the Goblin Queen card where it was defensive, and they had actually would stop all of, any sort of thunderbolt flying my way as just an additional defense. And again, I looked at things that accentuated my deck. I didn't just pick something run of the mill for the sake of it, right? What is one per deck? Well, in that deck, I didn't really have a lot of large attacks. So in that particular tournament, the Ed Memorial with that Lambo variant, I actually picked the Iceman 10. And boy, was that a hidden surprise. Like, people were not expecting to get chilled out like that from Iceman. It hit like a ton of ice bricks. So with people experimenting right now, and of course not even just experimenting, but winning tournaments with no negate decks, big bomb cards, much like in the modern environment, are just swinging games. Like, we can see from like draw threes to absorb sound style cards. Heck, even JWs are starting to wreak havoc again. You can see how someone like Justin took advantage of this. He said, "Oh, okay, I'm playing people who are playing these Wonder Woman Joan decks and they got no negates. Oh, I dare you to play me Dave with your Zeus deck, because guess what? Colossus does drop 3 out of your hand, Goblin does drop 3 off your placed cards, and of course, get rid of all your teamworks with Juggernaut." And like, these are cards that are just blasting off, like blasting. Like, it's almost like free play after free play. It is almost like the modern environment right now in Legacy. So with that being said, focus on where the meta's at. Who are you playing, right? Who thoughts like that where cohesion works well together. Now, I prefer to have those big bombs personally coming from my battle site because, then like I just mentioned, you have like 2, 3 shots at the right moment for those to come off. Whereas, of course, you could have the Colossus card already have a special placed on your character, Colossus, and then all of a sudden they place out, and you're just like, ooh, this Colossus card is garbage right now, or they have 1 card left in their hand, or they get to play first and they play 2 cards out of their hand, and you're just like, well, this Colossus card's going to be a 1-for-1, So like, there are moments where it doesn't overtly work out well for you when it's being drawn and timing is not always on your side. But those big bombs are going off because I'm telling you, negates are just like not out there, And I was watching a podcast recently where, he brought up that, a dual negate deck could possibly really be the answer right now in this meta. And then all of a sudden you're going to be a dual negate deck and face nothing but teamworks. But, there's a good swing and flow right now in this Legacy game that is just so exciting. It's breathtakingly exciting. I will say this. I don't think a lot of people right now have read the NAOL guide to Legacy enough. There was quite a lot of changes to specials that occurred in the game. Like, I'm talking, as I just mentioned, that Goblin Queen card being changed over to being defensive. The ability that, BQ specials can pull anything out of, anything literally out of your dead pile right now. I mean, how have we not seen a Scarlet Spider deck? Like, Scarlet Spider is not as bad as you think. You got a full teammate of Void. He's got a pin, and he's got, go get any card you want. I mean, there's thoughts there now. And I mean, I'm shocked. I'm personally shocked after everybody went nuts, and I'm talking nuts for like 2 years, and I may have been, you know, the band leader in that, but everybody went nuts about Mole Man and his KC special for like 2 years. How have we not seen a Mole Man Beyonder deck where you literally can just KC, 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 and like push cards left, right, and center? Like it's almost like free vertigos, defensive now, let alone leader having it as well. Leader and Mole Man, both 16 points. You throw Beyonder in the middle, and you just any KC is really putting cards anywhere you want. So there's still so much more, and I can only imagine once these new sets come out, like what Legacy is going to do, let alone these new sets doing things for Modern as well. We're going to touch on that just in a sec, but you know, I'm just shocked we haven't seen these style of decks, And I will say this personally, and people can always argue with me because that's what the fun of these podcasts are. But with the NAOL prize pool now essentially on par with the regionals, you know, you know, and I will say, don't sleep on these tourneys. Don't just think I'm going to the regional because I want blank. It's like these legacy tourneys, like financially, are just as worthy. If not, heck, you got to think in the top 8 in the NAOL right now, they're giving away a lot. You're getting these foil power cards for TFAC. And I mean, we're seeing online that those things are going for 300 plus a box of Skybound. That's a $450 value. I'm sorry. I think the cards are beautiful, but like, is that NAOL foil card really beyonder level finance value? It's like, wow, wow. So like that plus the money, like these NAOL tourneys are legacy tourneys are worthy to put your time and effort into and think it through. That's why I say these Ironman tournaments are just going to be crazy coming up. Like playing a full day of Modern and then having to switch gears, put your mind in something, and then playing a full day of Legacy. Whoo! It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It's going to feel, honestly, like I think these two weekends coming up might be the two greatest Overpower weekends this game has ever seen. And of course, that's June, the Columbus tournament, and then Canada, Niagara in, we're going to say last week of July, first week of August, somewhere in that vicinity. They are going to be two of the greatest weekends. So make your plans. Like I said, I will actually be in all 4 events on both weekends. So it's going to be a good time. If we sit across from each other, good luck, though. Good luck. I don't think just basic decks are the way anymore. People talking about, I always reference it as a Lambo because trust me, when I build these versions of, the Lambo, they fast and they furious. I don't drive no Cadillac like people talk about. These Cadillacs, they put in wacky cards, they put in things that don't really fit. They just do not drive like a Lambo. But not everybody can drive a Lambo. That's why people drive Cadillacs. But I don't think these basic decks are it anymore. Now, I'm not saying they're not good. I'm not saying they're top tier. I'm saying they're A tier. But there's a lot of A tier decks out there right now. And there's a lot of ways to deal with those decks. In Legacy, you just have to look past just defense offense now. It's not just defense offense anymore. It is now, what is my deck doing? Is it clicking? And is it, countering your deck? Is it dominating your deck? What is it doing? So to kind of sort of push off the legacy thing, don't sleep on events. And I don't mean the event itself. I mean events. Events in Legacy are still winning games. And not just, the KO a character card, not just the no energy icons. Like we saw somebody like Corey Sims bringing, the switch aspect with 2 switch characters, and like that's dynamic thinking. That's like what's going on. And then, of course, having the cohesion with Hell's Kitchen and, the enforcers bringing the other switch there. Like, whoo, there's something to that. There is something to that. And that's the type of thought process I'm talking about as, using an event to your advantage. Finding these little blips. I mean, when Andrew won with that Galactus deck, he had seen that the meta was pure brute force, and of course, threw that brute force event in there. Might have got a little pushy sometimes when he played it, but you know, it was the right call. And knowing the metas and finding these events that just work for you. I mean, heck, the late Phil Miller is the only person to ever win a tournament with Event Horizon. And I think he was playing like 5 events in that deck at that time. 5 event, like, I mean, he understood that events were powerful. Using everything from, I believe in that deck, no energy icon to no teamworks to discard all placed universe cards. Like, these events change games. So choose them wisely and plan yourself for, if I face this event, what am I going to do? Obviously, if you're in a bad spot, it's over. But if you just kind of like, think it through. I'm building my deck. If I see a KO event in the first hand, who am I KOing? You can't just hope that doesn't happen, because guess when that's going to happen? In your top 8 match, in your semifinals, in the finals. You're just going to see the worst case scenario. And sure, maybe you're building your deck off luck, like maybe it's not going to happen, but if it does happen, know ahead of time who, what, where, when you're going to do. That switch event comes up now. Who are you switching? And then, of course, are you like prying into like KOing your reserve character then, so that you can move things forward? I do agree, Howard. That is probably one of the most busted cards. It is why, um, in Legacy, Onslaught Citadel is probably the uber top tier um, battle site out there, because posts, not affected by events is huge. Now, I will also say that for anybody out there who doesn't know the old card pool, Maverick has it too. But of course, he's on, not the greatest of battle sites. Sadly, any site he's on really falls into like similar characters and similar specials. So it really just doesn't overly work out. But I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that start to happen. A Maverick out of the battle site saying not affected by events. But that's exactly it. Like, have these forethoughts. So, you're not going to be able to do well against like no energy icon. Maybe you do play Onslaught Citadel, and maybe anytime you see someone playing, Fatal Attractions, you instantly think, okay, first post I see, that's coming out. That's my instant move. And especially as we just mentioned, no negates, baby. No negates. So guess what's happening? Obfuscate's in play. As a matter of fact, it was in play. Obfuscate was in play in the finals in Houston. And boy, I tell you, when no X icon comes up and Obfuscate is there and you just get to play it, or you see you're playing against that any hero deck and you look over and you see Shattered Image and you're like, Obfuscate, now I can play every single activator when your dumb event comes up. These are the things. Think it through, have the forethought. And like I said, if you want to be the next tournament winner, you have to be this way. Sure, if you're just going to these tourneys to have fun, you want to just enjoy yourself, you build a deck and you just like playing Overpower, please do it. There's tons of people who just really enjoy Overpower. But if you want to win these tournaments, you have to be at the level where you're almost eating, breathing, sleeping Overpower. I can tell you there are almost every day when I'm just walking in my free time, maybe not free time, I'm working and I'm walking around and I'm always running decks through my head. I'm always running battle site combinations. I'm always thinking about different things. And a lot of the epiphanies come off people's decks that I've been watching on these tournaments. And the next thing pops in my head, and the next thing pops in my head. So Overpower, with its 2 formats, has created a fun environment. Of course, right now with the limited card pool that Modern has brought, I'm not saying the meta's figured. I mean the player pool's too small to really accommodate that. But we're at the point now where we really truly are. We're just waiting for these new sets to sort of beef up and bring Modern to almost this legacy level. I don't know if it'll ever get there per se in the full strategy effect that legacy brings, but I do believe that, once TFAC comes out, once Skybound comes out, you're gonna have these moments where that player pool or that character choice pool is just gonna be quite huge, and the strategies will get a little bit deeper. I do fear that, as we start to creep up a lot more characters like the Zorros or the Three Musketeers style kits, that you're gonna start to run back into these defensive style decks, and especially with the new battleground being very defensive, I think it will start to almost shift from like a string style game to a defensive card advantage style game again, and all of a sudden you'll see some JWs being or those Van Helsing 3 energies start to really play, or the Invisible Man 5s as, you pound through these defensive style cards. But it is fun right now. And, moving forward, we just had the TFAC Kickstarter, and I'm sure everybody is excited to see the characters. I was very concerned when I saw that two of the 8 stat characters were 19 points. To me, I was just like, "Whoo, that's one of those unique things that." I don't really care about their kit. They're gonna have at least one, two, three different, decent specials, and that's probably all you're gonna need because of the point level that you're gaining from this. And of course, as we all saw in the thumbnail that I did, those metal cards are just truly going to bring something special to this game. With the TFAC Kickstarter, I think you're really looking forward. One of the characters, I think it was Sachi, that Brazilian folklore character. That character having a negate universe card. Like, that was revealed, and to me, that's a big card. Not only does it, almost act as the Tarzan, avoid a universe you can't make any additional attacks after, but it also becomes universal, where it actually will be able to stop a lot of these strings that you're getting already in terms of, ally card, and you think you're about to like play your Joan 3 or Joan 4 and then 2 additional attacks, and it's like, oh no, I'll stop it at the ally. I'll just negate that universe card. Like, these cards are gonna have some power, and I think already with TFAC, I believe it's going to be available in the Canadian regional. It's going to change things quite quickly, let alone in Legacy. It could have its own ramifications. We're going to really sort of save the Skybound chat for, when we start to see more characters. But I think you can already see, as we sort of saw the Invincible himself kit, that I think there's going to be a lot more unique things when you start pairing up battle sites with these. And I'm going to reference them as KC style specials, where you're dragging hits over to a character. There's a lot that can be done there freely, especially when you're tucking hits, when you're doing things like that. It's really, really going to be great. And, I didn't even overly think about all of that, Howard Bertrand, where, negating a universe card, I actually didn't even comprehend it till you wrote it, but, like, the fact that you can negate off your permanent record and then draw with Asclepion, uh, I mean, that just changed a lot. I mean, I'm very curious what this character's, threat level is gonna be. Uh, I'm gonna just say, I think that's it for tonight, friends. Um what a great episode. I know we talked more, dare I call this one of those filler episodes of a season, but we kind of just talked a lot about stuff, maybe not overly specifics, but I think, it started to really get into your mind where you need to be moving forward in this season one with both the modern format as well as the legacy format. I'm going to say a unique thing though. You really all need to join me next week as I have an incredible guest appearing for a player profile on the show. Um, Boy, his face seems like it's everywhere right now, but well warranted, well warranted. I'm gonna have a player profile with Andrew the Prodigy Taylor next Wednesday here on the Overpower Mountain podcast. It ain't gonna be like his show. We are gonna talk strategy all episode long. I want to pick his brain about how he prepares, what he does, so that all of you can see exactly how the national champ got to where he is. He's one of those new style players that came on the scene, only a few years ago and rose through the ranks quite quickly. I'm also going to, spoiler alert, I'm going to explain the origins of his nickname as well. But join me next week as I have the prodigy himself, Andrew Taylor, the Overpower national champ, on the podcast with me. We had worked a long time to make this happen, and it's going to be quite a great show. I think it's going to be really eye opening. I got some great questions. When we do player profiles, that I really pick their brain about strategy, thoughts, and I think this is a person who's really going to sort of bring something to you at home. And having two of the potential best overpower players in the world talking side by side is never going to be a bad show. So keep thinking overpower, deck building, and getting to the top of the OP mountain. This is the Overpower Mountain podcast, and I am the OP GOAT. Good night.